Good evening. My name is John Holgerson, and before I read the two poems I selected for tonight, could we just have a round of applause for Jennifer Harris and the other? I'm hoping that next year we'll be here again for the third annual Plymouth Poetry Festival. I just wanted to say briefly how I picked these two poems. They're very short love poems. And I've been the member of a writers group now for almost a year. Our first anniversary will actually be next month. And last night we had our June meeting, and one of the members said to me that they had been looking over my first collection of poetry that was published slightly more than a decade ago, Broken Borders. And they noticed that there were a number of love poems in the collection. And the way that that was said to me, it either meant that they were surprised I'd been able to write so many love poems, or that I had written any at all. So there's just a little bit of background. Please keep in mind, both of these poems were written when the person standing before you right now was in his mid-20s. Just yesterday. Right? This first poem is a poem that I wrote when I was an exchange student at the University of London in England. And I was living in a youth hostel, which was actually the Catholic chaplaincy attached to the University of London. It was divided in half. Girls on one side, boys on the other side, or I should really say young men and young women. But we shared breakfasts, we shared dinners, we socialized quite a bit, probably a lot more than the priests and the chaplaincy were aware of. But there was one girl whose name was Sarah McKeon, and Sarah was very popular. So in an effort to try to gain an edge over the competition, I would stop on my way back from class at a vendor on the street who was selling flowers. And I would bring a bouquet of flowers on occasion and give them to her that night or perhaps the next morning at breakfast. So I wrote this poem for her, but there's really two things, or one thing you need to know. And that is, I never gave her the poem. And as far as I know, she's never seen it. I put it inside a book of poems that she said she read on occasion, hoping that she would find it, but I have no idea if she's ever read it. So you are all my surrogate Sarahs for this evening, and I dedicate it to all the ladies here in the Uva Wine Bar. Bouquet of Flowers. This poem is my last bouquet of flowers for you. If you read this late at night, remember only certain jukebox records and soft moments of conversational touch. If you read this in daylight, remember words of luck on spring mornings and smiles of confession over breakfast. When I am no longer here beside you, read this poem. Remember your place in my life. That was the spring of 1970. I'm going to go back a little bit in time to the summer of 1969, when I was on my way back to college at the end of August of 1969. I had, I guess, to use an old school term, a summer romance with a young lady from June through August, knowing that I probably would never see her again. Once I went away to school and she went her way. I was going to the university, which was 1,000 miles from where I was living at the time.
What about Sarah?
Sarah stayed in London. She didn't follow me home.
I never read that poem.
So I knew I wasn't probably going to see this young lady whose name was Anne. And again, so I wrote this poem for her, and I did give it to her, and I know she did read it. She heard me read it to her. But more than that, I guess there's really not too much to say. And I only do the backstories because we have a member of the audience, and I won't point him out. I don't want to embarrass him, but he always wants to know the genesis of the poems he hears people read. So I tried to satisfy his curiosity this evening. This is called Lament. Before I left, I meant to trace the profile of your face with my finger, brush your curtain hair with a seashell comb, the way atavistic artists prepare portraits, the way the blind see to remember. Thank you.